Hey guys, and welcome back to the Nicola Collective Podcast with your hosts Emilio
and Olivia Nicola.
And we're going to talk about the grace of God, and more specifically, the grace of God in business.
So before we begin, let's understand what the term grace actually means, because I think a lot of people get that kind of confused. Also, if I sound kind of nasally, it's because I've been sick, so just kind of mind that. I'm not a smoker. So just
hey doll, how you do?
Just keep that in mind. So anyways, so I'm gonna ask you some questions about.
Okay. That'll make it easier, so you don't have to.
Yeah, what grace is and how we can apply it. Just a serious question. So
yeah. Okay.
Anyways,
so let's.
So what do you do in your own words? What do you define as grace?
I would say more specifically that God's grace is unearned and undeserved favor.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that keeps us from having to try to strive for everything, knowing that He has a plan for us. In other words, it's not something that we get and we don't have to go through the hustle and bustle in order to achieve, because it's already there for us. Remember, it's unearned and it's undeserved. So no, we're not entitled to it. And no, we don't have to do any works for it. But God still gives us
I'd say
grace
it's
freely.
The entire foundation of Christianity is basically grace, because that's literally what makes up the whole backstory of why we follow Jesus. It's His grace, you know what I mean? By grace we've been saved, you know?
Yeah, His grace finds us, and it's just something that without His grace, would you really want to follow Him? Without His mercy, would you be able to follow Him? No, because what's a whole bunch of, I guess, rules as the world would look at it as, a whole bunch of laws.
Without that, we would be doomed.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
There's no way we could even make it through anything in life. So there would, in the Old Testament and stuff, basically it was there was almost no grace. I mean, there was grace in the sense of animal sacrifices and stuff like that, but there was no grace in the sense of you could just ask for forgiveness and be forgiven, and that was that, and shame off of you basically, and almost no questions asked in a way. Obviously you have to
you follow it to a T or else you're messed up.
Yeah. Which part? The Old Testament? Or what
yeah,
are you talking about?
I'm talking about the Old Testament. You had to follow it to a T, or else you had to, do some kind of sacrifice, some kind of atonement, because at the end of the day, the wages of sin is death, and so that's kind of where it came from.
Grace is kind of messy too, because it's our whole entire healing process is messy. You know what I mean? It's I think our healing process is messy, but it's grace is
messy, is what you were saying.
Yeah. I think grace is kind of a messy process in the sense of we're not always going to do it perfectly, but that's why we have grace, because it covers us even when we, are at our lowest points or where we're at crossroads and we have no idea what we're going to do, but it's God's grace covers us through that, and we find a way to get through it because He allows us to get through it and He's with us through it. So it's kind of it's really it's different than any other religion, any other, I don't know.
It's completely different from any way of the world.
Yeah, any way of the world. We never really can understand it, because obviously we're never ever going to measure up to who God is and what God can do, but it's something where,
because grace is outside of our logic, and it's outside of our logical consequences. Because imagine someone did something wrong to you, or you knew of it. You typically want to do something back to them, but knowing God's grace and knowing that you should have His grace and forgiveness, because those go hand in hand, it changes things up. And if we didn't have God's grace, there would be so much extra mess in the world. It's already a mess, but there would be even more than today.
Yeah. So, okay, next question. Why is grace essential in Christian faith? Why do you think it's essential?
I think it's essential because it takes everything away from I had to do this to I get to do this.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're not forced to do anything, and you're not forced for consequences to people. You're not forced to be good. You're not forced to do anything, right? But you get to, because you're wow, God loves me so much. He's not holding this over my head. He's not doing this. I want to be able to do the same thing. It's a great example of how to live.
It's because of what He's done. that's why, you
exactly,
know, instead of like what we can do, because on our own it's just like we're not able, like I would not be able to forgive people if it was just, if I had no faith in God. I would just be like, screw that, you know what I mean?
I think that's for everybody. I mean, like if you really look at it, like without grace, like,
well, it's like if you think about just people in the world, it's like I don't know how they actually truly forgive people if they've wronged them, because I know people say it's like they've forgiven them, whatever, they've moved on, but it's like truly, it's like in order to forgive someone, you have to have some sort of faith in God, because it's like without that you can't. I couldn't move on. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't be able to move on.
There would be no reconciliation. It would just be like, no, they did me dirty. I'm staying away completely. There's no way of me talking to them about God. There's no way of talking to me about.
But I think it's also recognizing the fact that like I'm imperfect. I'm not good enough. I'm all of these things, but he is. So it's like I can overcome all of these things because of that, and I can do anything because of that. And it's like I don't know. That's what's gotten me through a lot of things. It's grace, you know, and it's grace for people.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, I would say, because it's like, yeah, sure, it's funny that I would say it like that, but I think it's just a perfect way to say it, because it's so difficult to describe these things, and you have to be able to find the words for something that's so illogical, I guess you could say, something that doesn't make any sense, and putting words to it. I mean, that's just an amazing way to say it.
Yeah, and I think it's like also it's like I have a hard time forgiving myself, you know, and it's like that's, you know, I think.
It's okay.
I don't want to cry on camera, dude. That's just stupid. Like,
it's okay. I think it's important to be real with people, even if it's the ugly. You know, you got to show people the good, bad, and the ugly sometimes, because without it, they'll just think that your life is perfect. Which, honestly, guys, like, none of our lives are perfect. None of us are perfect. The only one that is Jesus.
Yeah,
so
but I think it's like also just like giving yourself grace, even though like it's like it's one thing to mess up and do things when you're not a Christian and you're just in the world and stuff, but then when you're Christian, it's like you struggle because you're constantly having to, like, you know, make sure you're doing things, having grace for yourself too. And it's like, I don't know,
it's hard to have grace for yourself, especially knowing that you're Christian, because you just want to be the best, you want to do everything, and it almost feels like, oh my gosh, like, am I being judged for it? And you judge yourself the hardest. Typically you're your own worst critic, and the enemy also likes to play on that. You know, he's like, he knows that your flesh is, you know, weak, and he doesn't want us to be closer to God, so of course he's gonna like whisper those things in our heads and or in our ears, and you know, that's where it feels like everything's messed up. But then again, coming back to the grace of God, we're able to rebuke the enemy because we know that he'll forgive us. We know that he'll, you know, give us undeserved favor, because that's just who he is.
Well, and I think that also just, you know, when you mess up, you have to just recognize that it's like, yeah, it's said we're gonna mess up, you know, like in the Bible it talks about how we're gonna mess up, you know, and it's like we're not perfect. And I think a lot of the times Christians try to hide the fact that they're not perfect, and they won't show their sins to each other, and they won't show what they're struggling with, and they won't show, you know, anything, and it can be detrimental to other people's faith, because it's like
when you don't show grace, someone can be pushed away
but it's like you don't know that, you think you're alone in it, like you think you're alone in your mess and what you're going through and your mess ups and stuff, and it's like that's not true.
And that's kind of where the enemy wants you to. It's like in isolation. So there is a difference, and we just want to make it a point that there's a difference between isolation and solitude, because solitude is there so you can dive deeper, you know, grow closer to God, and that's you and him. But isolation puts you by yourself. You're not with anybody. You're not with the Lord. You're just alone with your own thoughts, and even the enemy to whisper to it. And unbeknown, things go into a downward spiral.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, you know, finding community in those moments where it's like you can tell somebody else, like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need you to tell me that it's going to remind me that it's going to be okay. Remind me that God's grace is more than, you know, enough to cover anything, you know what I mean, and to protect us from anything. And it's like, you know, that's the thing. It's
Remember
like,
that song, Your Grace is Enough? It's like, your grace is enough. You know, I'm not gonna sing it, but
can you sing it for us?
No, but the lyrics I think go like, your grace is enough, your grace is enough. You know, heaven reaches out to us.
Yeah.
Your grace is enough for me. You know.
Yeah.
To
I think
you.
just because you're a Christian doesn't mean that, you know, you're not gonna, like, we oftentimes think that grace is for the people that are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's for
everybody.
It's for his people too. And it's for, I mean, obviously it's like, it's for the people that you wouldn't really expect to be messing up, but of course they're
right,
they're gonna mess up. And it's like, that's the thing. It's like, we have to constantly keep that in check, because if we're not, then we could, you know, just think that we are fine. We don't need God's grace because we're already forgiven, whatever. And there's no need to apologize. There's no need to reconcile. There's no need to admit our faults or anything, but that's just
I think at
true.
the end of the day, being Christian and feeling that, like, knowing that you feel the remorse, you feel that almost guilt from consequences, it shows how much stronger you are in your faith, because if you weren't close to God, it wouldn't bother you at all.
No, I know.
If you were far away from God, you'd be like, I could do it again if I want to.
That's how I used to feel when I was younger. It's like I would be able to mess up and do whatever I wanted, and I wouldn't feel bad whatsoever at all.
Just do it again
and
the next
now,
day sometimes.
The second I mess up anything, there's conviction, there's, you know, pain, there's like, you know, it sucks. It literally sucks. And sometimes I hate that, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, can't I just get away? Like, can't I
you just want to get away with it without the repercussion.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
You know,
but it's like it's almost like, because God's our Father, it's like you kind of have to understand that was wrong. It's like when you're teaching your child, is like you're teaching your little kid, and it's like, no, you can't do that. You have to here's what you're gonna have to go through to know that that's not okay.
Like, imagine like when you were a kid, you probably broke a glass or two, one of the dishes, and you had the choice of, okay, hiding the glass is probably bad because someone's going to find out sooner or later that the glass is broken. Or I could tell them now, and yes, there might be some consequences, but I know that my dad is going to be okay.
Well, and the thing is, it's funny because it's like our worldly parents, they might not know, but God always knows. There's no way, like, there's no way of getting around that. And that's what I always think of. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, anytime I can hide things from anybody, but God, no. Like, that's what, and that's the thing. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also scary, because it's like, that's where I think, like, you know, the fear of God comes in, where it's like, you know,
like the fear of God is more of a reverence. Like, you respect the fact that he knows everything and he will take care of you, but you know that if I don't do what he says, like, there are consequences at the end of the day.
It's total respect for the fact that he knows everything. He knows what you're doing. There's no way you can hide it. Like, when we come and talk to him, he already knows, but he just wants to hear it from us. Like, he just wants to hear from us that we're sorry, or that we need to, you know, talk to somebody, like, talk to him about this. And that's what he wants from us, you know? So,
not to get too far into it, but it just reminds me of some situations, you know, like, now that you mention it, it's like, it just makes me think, like, you have, like, you put it in your own position, like, you have the knowledge, but you just want the person to tell you. You know? And like, you want to hear from their voice, because you don't want it to seem like
when you already know that someone's gonna do something, or they did something, but it's like, you'd rather just have them own up to, like, you want them to own up to it and recognize their faults and their flaws, so that you can move on together. And it's not that, like, that if you didn't, because God, like, this is where God's grace comes in. It's like, there are some times where it's like, we don't even realize we're messing up, and we mess up, and we won't even apologize, because we might not realize that it's wrong. But that's where God's grace comes in, because he knows. And sometimes there'll be times where he's gonna let you know that's you know, but it just depends, you
without
know?
God's grace, like, one, you wouldn't go to him, and two, people wouldn't go to you, right? Because like, imagine, like, God saying, like, consequences are consequences. You are going to face the wrath of everything.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, screw that. I'm just gonna, if I'm gonna have to face these repercussions, regardless of what I did, regardless of any without like having forgiveness or grace, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing, because it's gonna be the same consequences. And same with people going to you. It's like, shoot, why would I go to you if you're gonna yell at me? Why would I go to you if you're gonna, beat me over the head with some kind of like word, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that like I don't think God ever really punishes us nowadays, but he lets us go through the natural consequences, natural repercussions. Not he's not gonna like spite you.
You made your bed, you're gonna lie in it.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, yes, daughter or son, I forgive you, but you also, hun, you're gonna have to go through this for a time right now, and he lets you go through these things so that you don't do it again.
Like an extreme example is like a murderer, right? Yeah. And they find Christ in jail, but it's like, hey, look,
they're still going to be in jail for life.
You're still going to be in jail. That's the consequence of what you did.
And it's like, it's important to understand that like just because you're forgiven, it doesn't mean that you are completely out of.
You're set free for eternity, but obviously like you're in this. You're here. You're in this world. But I also
consider. I like to like. I don't know. This just popped up. It's like consider it joy, because it's like because you get to go through that. Now you're gonna not want to hurt yourself again, which you are. When you sin, you basically like hurt yourself. So it's like you're not gonna want to do that again. You know what I mean? Because you've gone through that, and because just like when you're teaching a kid when they're little, not to do something, it's like, oh, last time I did this. Shoot, I had to, clean up that whole entire mess, or I had to, I was hungover for like 5 days later, you know what I mean? And it's like, you don't want to deal with that again. So you're just like, okay, I'm going to not do that, And so it just depends on the situation. But
yeah,
I feel like there's always some sort of the majority.
I think little small things build up at some point, but it's not.
I'm not talking about like every single circumstance. There's certain circumstances where it's just like, come to God and he's gonna, you know what I mean? It's like, you didn't know something and you messed up and it's like, but you know what I mean? Or there's specific times, specific moments. It's not like one size fits all for everything. It's like, it just depends. So keep that in mind when you're, listening to this.
Right.
So yeah, but anyways, I'm gonna ask you another question. So okay, so when operating your business, how would you say that you can show grace and have grace in certain circumstances?
It just really reels back to that point that I made where it's I get to and not I have to. It really changes everything up, because when you have that mentality of I get to, not I have to, you know that you can just change someone's life in some kind of circumstance, whether they're Christian or not. Like in a service-based business, if you have non-Christian clients, there could be a huge impact, and they'll just be wondering why you're so great, and it's because of God. You want to show people the grace because you experience the grace. You want to show people mercy because you experience his mercy, and you want to bring peace to a situation because you've experienced the Lord's peace. And when people see that, it changes how they react. It's a chain reaction. You can be, obviously you're operating from an action, which is the Lord, and you would then become a reaction of that, right? I guess you could say action, reaction, physics. And then other people would be the same thing. It's a domino effect, right?
Yeah.
Once one hits, it's going to hit the next, and it's going to hit the next over. And people need that. People might not have known that they needed his grace. They might not have known that they needed grace in general. But when you show them that, they want to do something different, typically.
Yeah. They won't just start acting the typical way that they would normally act in a situation, I'd say, because it forces people to almost like
in a normal situation,
it almost actually forces people to have grace with you too, because I'd say like if you're having grace with them, if you're being patient, if you're
they're gonna look like a jerk if they're not,
and it's like it's not really about that, because obviously we do that regardless. You know what I mean? And in our business too, like consistently, it's like you have to have grace, because sometimes there will be situations where it's like, a client will say something and you're like, okay, I could respond, but I'm not going to, you know what I mean? Like, or it's your fault when it's really not your fault.
And knowing that you have God's grace allows you to make those decisions, to be slow to speak and quick to listen. It really helps you hone in on those traits, because if you didn't have grace, you would, like you said, you would instantly want to just clap back. You would want to say something, snippy, like someone might have said something snippy, or you might want to give them like just some kind of messed up response. But because of that, it changed your heart,
Yeah. And also I think in business in general, having grace is just professional.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even, I mean, it's spiritual, but it's also not even spiritual, because it's like you can just have grace in a professional sense of like, okay, like, let's move on from this.
If you were cutthroat in business everywhere with everybody, no one would want to go to you.
Yeah.
Like, at all.
Yeah. It's smart to be graceful, because if you're not, somebody can go somewhere else. I mean, your client can go somewhere else, your customer could go somewhere else. They can always find a better version, or not even. They can always find
they could find someone that does something similar,
or they can find someone that isn't gonna, smack talk them, or whatever, or just
sometimes like, even if the person that comes after you, say they go to someone else, if that person has less quality but they're nicer, they'll stick with them because they like the person. That's the whole point of the
it doesn't matter if you're providing
personal brand.
It doesn't matter if you're providing top tier service. If your personality and if you're not having grace, I'm sorry, but nobody's gonna want to work with you, like, at all. No. Like, trust me, because it's like, you have to be a people person in order to work in any sort of business. You have to be a people person.
You don't have to be a people pleaser, but you have to be a people person.
Yeah, you got to have grace in like situations, and be willing to work with people's responses and stuff, because it's like, if you're not doing that, it's really easy for somebody to just be like, oh, on to the next.
Yeah.
So it's really important in a business sense, in a spiritual aspect, and also an unspiritual aspect. Not even in like a bad way, but just like, it's literally not spiritual. You know what I mean? It's just basic common business rules, I guess you could say, and unspoken rules in a sense.
Why do you think we have HR stuff like in businesses?
Yeah, that's true.
Because
But if you're like us and we're like the everything currently in our no,
I mean, like, business, as a whole, like,
if you're in a huge corporation, it's a lot different than,
that's what I mean. Like, not like we specifically, but just like why companies have HR. It's like they need someone in there to show them grace. They need someone in there to like kind of hold their hand for things, help them go through whatever they might have experienced, that kind of thing.
Okay, so next question. How can Christian entrepreneurs work hard while also balancing trusting in God?
How can they work hard while also balancing trusting God? It's not, I wouldn't say it's a balance, but a rhythm. It's something about keeping it up and keeping the trust in God first as opposed to your work. Remember, God above all else. If you're doing anything, like if God blessed you with a business, it's his business. It's God's business. So you're serving him regardless of if your business is dealing with average people in this world, or Christians in general. You're serving the Lord first, and you're serving the Lord through serving people, through whatever kind of thing your business is. So that really just takes us back to his grace and it's not divided, but it's a rhythm. It's not something where you have to hop to one side, then the next, and then this to keep the center even. It's a rhythm where it's just constantly flowing and keeping it moved center, That's kind of my take on it.
Okay, so what are some practical ways to shift from striving to surrendering in your business?
It's easier said than done, but honestly, it's not even that hard to switch. You just have to focus on who the Lord is, not just what he brings you. Because if you start looking at business and just in general in life of what you can get out of anything, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get disappointed. You're going to face a lot of opposition. But when you give it up to God and you're going from, like, you're changing it away from striving, you're just kind of trusting in him, all the things kind of just come through. Like, for any kind of circumstance, like, obviously, yes, put the work in, but the moment that you stop looking for certain things, like the moments that they start showing up.
Yeah, it's like when you're trying to look for your partner, your husband or your wife or something, and then it's like the moment you stop looking, it's like that's when they show up in your life. And
and you're not being idle in it, right?
Yeah,
you're working on yourself. You're following him. You know, you're keeping these key points in your mind of what you're trying to look for.
And that doesn't mean just
but you're not searching for it.
Like, it doesn't mean completely like shutting yourself off to everything else. It's like in business, it's the same thing. It's like you don't just because you're, you know, letting God carry you through it doesn't mean you stop working. It doesn't mean you stop trying. It doesn't mean you stop doing new things and, you know, talking to new people and stuff. It's really just like a, you know, you're trusting in God. Like he's going to get you through it, and he's going to carry you through that situation and get you to the other side. But it's like, you have to put in the work too. It's almost like when it's like the story too, where I think you said it a few weeks ago, but it was like
the man on the deserted island.
Yeah. Or like, I sent you this. Was it that?
Yeah, the man on the deserted island.
Yeah. I sent you,
I sent you the guy in the helicopter.
Boat. I sent you a helicopter, and it's like all these things, and it's like sometimes it's really just like God wants to, I feel like, see you guys, or, you know, putting in effort too, and he's going to do that. He's gonna fulfill whatever he called you to, but it's like
taking action is still trusting
in God, because a lot of times I watch people just go, yeah, I'm supposed to start this business, I'm supposed to do this, and then they're like sitting there.
Are you waiting for someone else to do it for you?
Waiting for somebody else to start their business. Or not taking action. They're not doing anything, and they're just sitting there, and they're like, oh yeah, I really wish you could help me with this, and they don't want to try and learn any new skills or anything, and they just want, you know, somebody else to do it for them. And it's like, or they just aren't willing to put any effort into it, and they're trying to do the same thing that they always did, and it doesn't work. And it's like,
I remember I just posted on Threads earlier, and I said, what is it called? Expecting results and not putting in any effort is crazy.
Yeah, you know? No, it is, because it's like, you don't want to. It's literally, it's almost like delusional, like, because it's like, I don't know, like, there are some people who sometimes they will do literally nothing and things will just work out for them, and it's like, that's very rare. Like that almost never happens.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they're really not doing nothing. There's other things that are going on behind the scenes in a different situation. It could have been a person they knew, a certain situation they were in. And it's not even that they were just handed it. It was like they were in the right place at the right time, and there's still perspectives on that. There's
sometimes it's like that's certain situations work out, but in the sense of like most situations, it requires hard work, it requires effort, it requires years of doing different things, trying different things. The amount of times that we have tried like so many different things is like different business models, different, you know, whatever, to get to the point where we're like, okay, you know.
But we weren't the crazy kids thinking that if we just sit on our hands, that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, we worked hard for like years almost now at this point, where it's like, it's been like years to the point where we were like, okay, like this didn't work, let's try something new. This didn't work, okay, I guess we got to pivot and try this new, but while trusting in God, knowing that like the right situation will work out. And that's not saying like you just, you know, give up right away when something doesn't work out. It's like sometimes you got to pivot, and that's okay.
Yeah,
you know,
I think the grace of God even covers the aspect of feeling, you know, what's it called, like imposter syndrome, right? You feel like you don't deserve it. You feel like you didn't do anything to get it, but then you look back and it's like God's grace carried you through that, and that's how you were able to develop the skill, and that's how you became the best. And it's not because of all the work that you did, it's a combination of the work that you did, knowing that God's trusting in you, or God's trusting you with the business, you're trusting in him to take care of it, and he's blessing you with the grace and the mercy to either do everything the right way or mess up here along the road, because there will be bumps in the road in business. Like there will definitely be some hard times, whether it's like really, really tough or like just a little bit tough that you can figure it out. Because business is not a perfect world, like at all.
No, that's okay. I think also like just recognizing like that's okay to have those moments, and it's like, I think also it's like, I feel like having that trust and faith in God really reduces the anxiety and the stress in your business, in the sense of like, okay, God called me to this. If it doesn't work out, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
It's for a reason. And
Very
it
true.
reduces that like stress and anxiety that, you know, I'm going to put everything I have into this business.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it my all. But if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay because God has a plan and he has a way for me to pivot to the next thing if need be.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it's like, I've realized that like, even if I'm not the most successful person, even if I'm not, you know, like have a ton of money or whatever,
Yeah, like
it's like
his grace prevents you from comparing your chapter 1, like just to fully say it in one straight shot. His grace stops you from comparing your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 20. Because you look at someone's chapter 20 and you're like, I want that car, I want that house, I want whatever they're doing, I want their vacations. But you're at chapter 1 and it's so easy to get lost in it. Yeah. Thinking like if they're succeeding in exactly what I'm trying to do.
Oh my gosh, like in social media and stuff, you see everybody's chapter 20 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're like, they've gotten, you know, they have the cars, they have the rich lifestyle, they have the big house or whatever. And it's like, you want that. And they make it seem like they literally worked a few hours and got it. And that was it. And that's all they had to do. And it's like, at the end of the day, I think a lot of the time, and this isn't for everyone, but a lot of the time those people are miserable. Like they're miserable because what type of story is that to just, you worked a few hours and then you got to it? It's like, no, where's the stories where it's like you worked for years and years and you refined your skills for years and you did new things and you tried new things and you trusted God throughout the entire process. And guess what? God blessed you through it and in it. And it's like, those are the stories that matter. And that's where it's like your success, it means something because you realize that the only way you could have gotten that success is through God.
Yeah, exactly.
The only way that you could ever achieve anything is through God. And that's what
And even when people don't want to acknowledge that.
Yeah,
like,
and it's true. It's true. It's like, you know, sometimes things come from the enemy. Let's just be real. Sometimes success comes from the enemy and it's meant to
do damage.
Take people away from God. And then there's times where it's like, no, God brought your success. God gave you everything you have, and it's like that is real, and he knows that you're going to be a good steward of it.
Even if someone got something from the enemy, let's just say like someone became rich because
they can always use that for
God will be able to change the story. He can do anything that seems impossible to us.
There's nothing that's too far from God. Like God can always change everything. Like, that's the thing. Like I do want to acknowledge that because it's like a lot of times I think like, you know, people got to a certain place where, you know, maybe they started out in their business doing the wrong thing and it wasn't okay. But then God was like, no, I'm going to, God's grace came over it and was like, okay, I'm going to flip the script on you and we're going to use this for my glory and you're going to be blessed through it, you know, and that's okay. Yeah. And it's like, I think it's crazy. Like I've looked back in the past like year and stuff and it's like, I think like it's weird to see how much like by trusting God and how much by just knowing that I'm not able to do this by myself. So the only way it's going to work out is if God carries me through it. I'm going to put in all the work. I'm going to do it. I'm going to trust God. I'm going to be a wise steward. I'm going to all of these things. And then it's like you watch God transform your year almost, or like your life in a way, and you're like, oh gosh, like that's crazy to see where I was like a year ago. And it's like that's how it is. It's small steps over, and it's not even crazy transformations. It's like God puts you where you're at for the season, like in the season that you are at, because that is what you are meant to like be in for a time until he knows you're ready for the next season. It's meant for you to grow. It's meant for you to understand that like it's only through him that I've gotten here. And then that's when you can move on to the next season of life or the next season in your business. And it's like, that's what I've really had to realize is like every step, I don't need to rush to the next point, even though I want it. Like I really want that. And I know God knows that, but it's like, I'm going to be happy with where I'm at right now. And I'm going to trust God right now. And I may not be making $100,000 in my business every month, you know what I mean? But I know that this is where God has me right now. and I know that this is where I'm supposed to be. So how could it not work out? You know what I mean? How could it not work out? And I'm happy with that. And it's like, I want to obviously strive for more and do more. But, you know, having that happiness and that joy of where I'm at right now is so important, because I'm able to appreciate it. And then it's like, what type of life would that be if we're just like constantly trying to get to the next thing? It's like, there's stages of your business, there's stages of your life, and it's like, if God called you to this, you're meant to be in that stage for that time until God calls you to the next stage.
Exactly.
You know, and it's like, it's okay. It's really okay. And I know God's gonna get you through that. He's gonna provide for you through that, as long as you.
On the flip side too is like, God can open the door, but it's also up to you to walk through it too. Like,
true. That's true. Like, God opens doors all the time, and it's like, you know, and also God closes doors all the time. And sometimes, you know, it may be your time to do something else, or it may be your time to keep going and to get to the next part of whatever you're supposed to do. And that's where it's like, I think it's important to recognize that, because we can sometimes, I think, get in our heads a little bit about it and be like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this or whatever. And it's like, well, is it against God? And if it's not against God, I think it's like, you kind of like small steps until it's like God closes that door or says, no, like, don't do that, you know? And I think as Christians, it's wired in us. Obviously, the Holy Spirit being inside of you, it's like, it's hardwired within us to know, oh, this doesn't feel right. Or you know what I mean? Or this doesn't, you know, I'm going to pray about this. It doesn't seem like this is the right situation.
Right.
And praying about it and being like, okay, I got to double check to make sure, or like, you know.
Because you're not leaning on your own understanding. You're trusting that he's got you. That he's guiding your steps.
It's not just about your feelings. It's like, but obviously I think as Christians, this is how I truly feel. It's like, you get a feeling.
Yeah.
You get a gut feeling. People call it a gut feeling, but I honestly think it's the Holy Spirit most of the time.
God feeling.
Yeah, God. You get a God feeling, and it's like, no, this feels like it's from God.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously you pray, because sometimes, you know, we forget to pray, and we're just like, oh yeah, you know. But it's like, you pray, and so most of the time there'll be confirmation, or there'll be just like open doors for it, towards it, and God will be like confirming that for you, or somebody will confirm it for you, or whatever, like, and then you move forward, you know. And you move forward, and I've been there too, where it's like, I've kind of just like second guessed things, I guess you could say, or not even like moved forward in it, because I'm like thinking, well, I don't know if that's from God, and I don't know. And it's like, I think it's also like, you're scared because you don't know, like, it's a little bit uncomfortable, you're not used to it, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's okay. In business, that's going to happen like all the time.
You're not meant to be comfortable. Like, you know, you don't grow from being comfortable.
Yeah. But it's also like, I think at the same time, it's like you just gotta, it's almost like small steps.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, it's not even like how God describes, like, he always talks about walking. You know what I mean? Not like
walk by faith.
Yeah. Walking, not running, not jumping, not, you know what I mean? Like,
and you can't,
it's like walking, and that's where it's like, I think that's how our lives are meant to be. It's like, it's not meant to be this stressful race and more. It's meant to be small steps, because I think then you can look back and really realize how far you've come with just walking.
That just makes me think, like, how close to biblical truth is the tortoise and the hare story. You know, the hare was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get there faster, so I'm just gonna run. And he started gloating. He's like, I got this, I'm going fast. Yeah. Then he got exhausted. He started sleeping on the race before he even finished.
Yeah.
And then the tortoise is over here like, I'm getting there. I'm slowly getting there. And he crosses the finish line before the hare. Yeah. Because he was diligent, because he walked, he took it at the pace that he could go, and that he was trusted to go. knowing that the other person can blow way past them at a certain point.
Yeah.
But hey, the bell curve of you know.
Yeah, I think just by really having grace with yourself, with your business, you know, with other people, with all, like, you know, in every single aspect of your life, you're really able to know how to navigate and move forward in everything, because you're not operating by your own understanding. You're operating in the sense of like God's in you, telling you what to do and where to go. And it's really, I think it's really beautiful to have your life guided by God.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
Yeah. So this is going to be the last question. How can we create a business culture that reflects God's grace? Question mark.
You know, that's both an easy and a difficult question to ask, because you have to really think about that. Like, how can you develop a culture centered around grace?
Yeah.
And it's really the fact of just connection, right? Thinking about it, like, in the sense of, like, either you leave people out, you don't talk to anyone, and you're not showing any grace because you're not talking to anybody, or you reach out to people. You make it a priority to show people grace. You make it a priority to talk about business with them in a godly aspect. You make it a priority, you know, to even just have a regular conversation, you know, and you be the best that you can in the grace of God. Yeah. You show them the grace of God. You show them how to be peaceful. You show people how to, just to quickly say it, you be the best example of who God is, because you are a representative. You are an ambassador of Christ. You will show people what it is to be graceful, right? You will show people what it is. And that's how you develop a culture. It's by example. You can't develop a culture, you know, without the control group, right? You can't develop anything without some place to start. So if you're saying, yeah, I'm going to start a business, how are you going to start a business if you're not doing anything? If you're going to say, I'm going to go to church, you know, starting next week, but then you don't go to church, how are you making those claims without putting the action? Starting a culture is taking the step, taking action into being the example. Yeah, no, definitely. I think really grace and action, and grace, faith, and action. That's really like how I can describe that, is like, have grace for yourself, you know, have faith that God's going to get you through it, and take action. Yeah, because that's the only way you're going to be able to move forward in your life and in your business. That's your purpose on earth, is to make disciples, to be the salt and the light. Yeah. You know, that's how you have the biggest impact, you know. You know, if you ever look at it, like, Christians do have the biggest impact on the world. Yeah. And it's not because of them specifically, but because of God using them as vessels. And I'd want to say too, it's like there will be times where you are going to mess up. In your life and in your business. And that is like, the enemy will try to use that to keep you held back. But you got to remind yourself that God has grace for you as long as you ask him for it. You need to have grace for yourself, and you need to move forward and take action. Have faith that it's going to be okay, because it's like, that's what I try to remind myself, you know, right now and daily, because it's like, it's hard. It's really hard as, you know, as Christians, because we are constantly trying to do things God's way. Yeah. And it's hard. And we have to acknowledge that, and we have to realize that we are imperfect humans that have been saved by the grace of God. And that is why we are still here. That is why we're still going. And that's why we are able to, you know, have everything that we do and live this life that we do. And it's like, we don't deserve it. I couldn't agree more. We don't deserve it, but, you know, he gives it to us freely. And it's beautiful. You know, it's the best thing that, you know, and like, it's the best thing in the world, you know, and better. His grace that he gives freely is better than any, you know, anything you could ever ask for. You could ask for an abundance of things. You could ask for, you know, the Mercedes-Benz or the Rolls-Royce or the multi-million-dollar mansion. Yeah. But at the end of the day, without his grace, without his mercy, without him, you'll feel empty.
That's all that matters. Yeah. That's really all that matters. We can't just, we gotta just can't get caught up in the small things, you know. Just gotta remind ourselves of these.
And taking it back to reminds us of, taking it back to how to set up that grace culture, in other words, is like telling people about that, you know, like explaining that like there is grace, but explaining the fact that his grace is so much more than that house. His grace is so much more than that car. His grace is so much more than those social events and everything like that. Yeah. It's bigger, it's better, and it's for you. Yeah. You know, it's got your name on it. Yeah.
Anyways, I think we should probably end the podcast here because it's probably getting late. It's probably, we're like, okay, let's keep it to like 45 minutes this time, and it's probably going to be about an hour.
Yeah, but you know what? It's just the grace of God. There's so much to talk about with the grace of God. And even though it's hard to put the words...
I think that's what happens like every single time we record. And then we're like, we're going to... Because we're like, okay, we got to make sure we keep it within a certain amount of time. But then it's just like more stuff comes to you.
And that's what happens when God uses you.
Yeah. You know? So it's like you just are able to keep going. And it's like, why stop that? So I don't know. But anyways, guys, thank you for tuning in and hearing my voice, even though I sound like I know. You sound like I kind of like the voice, but I hate how I feel. You know what I mean? I sound raspy, but then I also just hate this feeling when your nose like runs and you're trying to keep it in the microphone and stuff. But anyways, so
anyway.
Sorry. I don't want to like coughing in the microphone, but it's like okay. Anyways, so.
Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.